What is going on, everyone? My name is Mark Real Jr., the Father's Rights Attorney, and you are watching another episode of the Father's Rights Playbook. And on today's episode, I have partner here at Real Father's Rights, Ryan Dreyer, and we are going to be talking about post-judgment modifications of support. Ryan, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So I'll start out with a little bit of a softball here. We're talking today about post-judgment modifications of support. So what exactly is a post-judgment modification?
All right, so a post-judgment modification is where there's been a judgment, final order on child support or spousal support. So when we say post-judgment, there's been some passage of time since the judgment. So say you had your divorce finalized in 2020. Now it's 2025 and things have changed. So what we're talking about here is the process of going back to the court and saying, hey, I know we set support at this time, but since that judgment, things have changed in a material way, either as to the opposing party's need or my ability to pay. And those are our basis for modifying that judgment, because the courts don't like to go backwards. They don't like to modify judgments. However, there's the recognition that life changes. People lose jobs. People have injuries, people find new spouses or enter into new relationships.
Yeah. So we'll stick with child support's a little bit more free-flowing because it's a calculation and things change. But the one that gets kind of technical and guys need to pay attention to and probably cost themselves quite a bit of money on is when it comes to spousal support. And we'll talk in the context. There's a really important delineation kind of formally at about 10 years. 10 years plus long-term marriage. That means you have a spousal support order that doesn't have an end date. Under 10 years, it's usually half the length of the marriage, so you have an end date, usually not as big an impact. But a lot of times you'll see people who, they had this long-term marriage, they were married for 10, 12, 15 years, and they're a decade into paying support, and a bunch of different things could happen. So, Ryan, I want you to go through what are some instances. So, guy comes to us, 15-year marriage. It's been a decade since the marriage. We'll say he's 60 years old, so nearing retirement. What are some reasons or what are some things that could happen that he could get his support paid to his ex reduced or even eliminated?
We're going to look at it, need and ability to pay. So first, on ability to pay, you lose your job, right? Or you get demoted, or you ran a business and the business isn't doing well.
We saw this a lot during COVID.
Huge
where people went from, there were people making $250,000 a year that went down to $30,000 a year and didn't file anything with courts.
Correct. And then you go back to the court and now you haven't paid for 3 years and you owe $100,000, $120,000. And you go to the court and you say, well, yeah, I couldn't have paid it. I can demonstrably show you that. And the court says, don't care. I don't care. Remember, and you say that's not fair. There's a legal term. Equity aids the vigilant, not those that sleep upon their rights. It is incumbent on you to file and say, all right, court, I've lost all this income. I can't do this anymore. Once you've filed, you've reserved your retroactivity to go backwards. So
the court can only go back to the date of filing.
Correct. In re marriage of Gruen for you legal nerds, but you can only go back that far. So you have to do that. The next, you get injured. You have diminished capacity. You are in the hospital. Someone's got to file for you. You've got to move forward on that, because again, doesn't matter how legitimate your reason is, if you don't petition the court to change it, nothing will happen and you will not be relieved of your responsibility.
I did see one instance, and there's some case law, I can't think of the case name, where they went backwards and the guy suffered a traumatic brain injury and was in a coma for like 2 years, and they went back to time of injury. But that's how extreme it has to be.
Yes.
Like, so many guys during COVID ended up so far behind on support because of extremely reduced income, but the courts weren't open. They kind of waited to see what was going on. All of a sudden, 18 months later, things go back to normal, but you have this support bill as if you were making all this money during that time.
Yeah, and I mean, we work in Southern California. I saw this happen a lot with the SAG strike and other things, where people went from making a lot of money, and a lot of them were like, well, it's gonna get resolved soon, right? I don't want to spend the money and the time. I'm not gonna do it. And then 1 month goes by, 2 months go by, 3 months go by, 4 months go by. Now all of a sudden they have no money, and now they've got a $28,000 arrearage, right? You've got to file to be safe, right? Because you don't know how long that strike's going to go on. So much of our lives are beyond our control when we look at economics. You've got to get in there right away. And that's huge, because again, especially if it's beyond your control, right? You don't have an ability to pay. This isn't someone who decided, you know what, all of a sudden I'm just going to go in and I'm going to retire from my job because it's a little stressful, and I'm going to go be a fisherman, or I'm going to go paint caricatures by the beach, right? These are legitimate reasons. And so you have to go back into court. You have to. Now, the other area we look at, Mark, is the other side's need going down, right? And so I'm going to give you a couple of different scenarios. One, their ability to earn increases. Maybe when you guys got divorced, they had just gotten a degree or just gotten into a career. And maybe they weren't making that a lot of money, or they've just got into sales. And now the income has increased to where it's half of yours or 3/4 of yours, or it's more than yours now. You need to go back. And so there is a provision in the family code, if you're a support payor, where every year you can ask the other side to fill out an income and expense declaration, give you their last tax return and their last 2 months of paycheck stubs. You need to be doing that, right? Be proactive in that. Because again, if you wait 5 years and all of a sudden you go, oh my gosh, they're making more money than me and taking my money, right? But if you didn't do anything, that's what you get. The next area we can look at, it's the big one, is cohabitation. Now,
biggest pain in the ass to deal with.
Biggest one, because there's so many lies, right? And there's different levels of skill from different exes. Some are very smart, some are straightforward and blunt about it. But so in most judgments, you're going to see termination of support if they remarry. But so many of these, you'll see, maybe you're on Facebook and you see a ceremony and you say, oh my gosh, they remarried. I'm free. I don't have to pay support anymore. And you go to them and you say that and they say, oh no, I didn't get actually married. That was a civil commitment ceremony, or that was a religious marriage. I didn't fill out the paperwork. And from a technical standpoint, that's true, because you are not married unless you file the correct paperwork with the state of California.
At minimum, you got to get marriage or cohabitation.
Right. Now, but in the cohabitation, what are we looking at? Because they're going to say, oh, no, he keeps his own place. So what might you have to do? You might have to get a private investigator. I would not encourage any man to routinely go to his ex's house every night and sit outside of their house, right?
Yeah.
Don't do that, because then we're just going to look at a domestic violence claim, right?
Well, and the credibility. Like if you got to go that route to say, hey, he's spending 5 nights a week, or the other one is like, oh, we're not that serious. He has his own place, but you're like, he's around the kids all the time. That's where a lot of the information comes from. Is you get kids like under the age of 10 or 12, and they'll just spill the beans to eat both parents.
Yeah, Matt was playing Monopoly with me all night last night. Yeah, and they'll be very tricky about that. So when we're looking at cohabitation, what you're really looking at is, have they joined into a single economic community, which thereby decreases their need for support, right? So are they sharing joint bank accounts? Are they going on big vacations together? Are they at all the family functions together? All these kind of things that show a commingling of finances, or at the very least a commingling of lives. Because what we're looking at is, again, if that other person is living there, it's decreased her need if they're paying half of her new mortgage or half of her rent.
That's another one too. Another sign is your ex is moved into a place that based on their financials they can't afford, so there has to be significant support from somewhere else.
Correct. So anything, or here's another one that's not cohabitation. They get a big inheritance, right? And now we come into, it's far less used, but separate property estate capable of self-support. They've gotten millions of dollars from a trust, or they've gotten significant assets, or I've even seen this one once where they at the time of the divorce, they got significant assets and they invested them well, right? And now they realistically don't need your money. I have one case where we had to hire a financial planner and a forensic accountant, but we basically we did the discovery, and we figured out that she had enough money at the date without support to live until 120 years old, meeting all of her needs. We further found out he was paying $7,000 a month, that she was donating the entire amount of his support to the Catholic Church and other charities, right? And so she obviously had no need, and thus even though it was a long-term marriage, we were able to get the support down to zero. That one's a lot different.
Interesting term, too, I will point out that you used there. I caught it. Listeners probably didn't, is support to zero. When you're in a long-term marriage, the best you can do is the court cannot terminate spousal support. Technically is always open to be adjusted. Mm-hmm. Short-term marriage, on the other hand, you can terminate spousal support, but the long-term marriage, it's something that, in theory, it could go the other way.
It could. And that's the other one we always got to look out for. What if one side gets cancer? What if one side becomes completely debilitated? And let's say it was the party who was paying it. You could presumably ask for support. If you had paid for 12 years and now you have cancer and the other person is living high on the hog, you can technically go after them for support. And that's why you're talking about the courts will not terminate. That's why when we look back into negotiating a judgment, right? That's why a date of termination is so valuable, right? Knowing that there's a date certain, because otherwise we get into this world post-judgment where we do have to show a lot. Again, a change in ability or need as life comes at you. It's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy.
Definitely. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for all the information to our listeners and viewers. Hope you guys found this informational, educational, a little bit entertaining. We'll see you guys next time on another episode of the Father's Rights Playbook.